Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Oneohtrix Point Never album, Magical Oneohtrix Point Never. Oneohtrix Point Never is the pseudonym of Mr. Daniel Lopatin. He's been at it for years now, and for me, one of the biggest figures in electronic and experimental music. From his ambient beginnings in Betrayed in the Octagon, the intense synth wave of Zones Without People, and the dystopian Russian Mind, instantly I thought that Daniel was really onto something. And ever since, I feel like Oneohtrix Point Never has become a modern master of pushing the boundaries of electronic and experimental music. Returnal was hazy and masterful. Replica was absolutely gorgeous and a masterclass of what you could do with tons of sampling. R+7 was equal parts gorgeous synths and twisted drones. And Garden of Delete is one of the most abrasive and wild-eyed and experimental electronic albums I've ever heard. It's one of my favorites and my favorite from Oneohtrix Point Never. Now, his last album, honestly, I understand that a lot of people weren't as into it as I was. It is a little tame, but it is also incredibly telling, and as far as a themed album goes, it's one of his strongest. And ever since, let's be honest, Daniel has been practically everywhere, from doing production for artists like The Weeknd to doing great movie soundtracks like Good Time and Uncut Gems. He has been all over the place. And from the sound of these new singles, he's going in a very whimsical, strange new direction. You really never know what he's going to do next, and I always love that. Let's chat about this thing. Early on in the album with Auto and Allo, honestly, I'm pretty shocked with just how whimsical and playful this is right off the bat. I'm not going to go as far as to say it's like this is light on the ears or anything, because it's not. It's actually just as heady and cosmic. But it's genuinely outside of his wheelhouse, and to say that at this point in his career, with everything that he's done, it's pretty wild. But still, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. A lot of the classy synths on this track bring me back to the simpler time of like R+7. But his vocals, I personally think this time around, even compared to like his Age of stuff, sound a lot better. They sound a lot more intact. This track just gets me pumped for an OPN project. Then we have Long Road Home, and honestly, I didn't even know how to tackle this track at first. It's pretty indescribable, but in OPN's own weird, sick way, this is kind of gorgeous. I love the lush instrumental and just how beautiful it comes off at points. And on top of that, between the vocals of Daniel Lopatin and his guest here, Caroline Polachek, I think there's a lot of great vocal work on this track. This just sounds like a Oneohtrix Point Never tune. It sounds like where he should be right now, just as twisted and hard to follow, but also kind of beautiful in his own way. And Caroline Polachek's vocals here give it just the amount of human touch. And the final atmospheric portion just gives me the chills. I Don't Love Me Anymore is one of the coolest tracks here. It's got a really great sort of funk. It's super sleek, and I love the way that the sort of ghoulish, otherworldly vocals here just seem to be pushing through the static. I just love moments like this where Daniel gives these human feelings to not so human tracks. His music is incredibly cold often, but in times like this, it's really hard to look past the emotion here. Bow Ecco also has some really cool ideas. I love the fluidity of this track, honestly. Like, it's just amazing to hear what a wizard of sound he has become. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't digging this entirely at first because I thought Daniel was just maybe selling himself a little short. But this twisted, warped synth ballad just makes me want to dive deeper. And No Nightmares is something that we don't always get from Daniel, and that is just a really easy to dive into great single. The Weeknd and OPN have worked together in the past, but I think this is their best outing together. It's a really lovely nocturnal ballad with tons and tons of synths. I mean, if we're being honest, it could have actually ended up nicely on the last Weeknd album. But I digress. I honestly think they just play off each other so well here. Lost But Never Alone is the sort of dose of weird that I needed right now. It's got some down-tempo vibes, and once again, we kind of sound like we're listening to a pop song from another dimension. It just sounds so manufactured, so cold, so inhuman, and I love that. But it's also just so telling, and when the rest of the instrumental pops in here, once again, it gives me the chills. It's what I love to hear from OPN. Honestly, it sounds like a horrible cassette riff of like some other dimensional pop track, and I love that. Now, if there's one thing that I don't like about this album, it's the flow of it. A lot of these interludes that make up a lot of this album actually kind of let me down. A lot of the crosstalk interludes, not really feeling a lot of them. Most of the time I feel like I do understand where they're going for, and I understand kind of the feel of the album, but I feel like with someone with such an immense attention to detail like Daniel Lopatin, I just feel like a lot of them are kind of wishy-washy. I will say this though, the fourth installment of the cross-talk interludes is the best one here because it makes me look at this album in the big picture, which is honestly what I feel like I should be doing. I don't want to talk about them too much because most of them range from 12 to 15 seconds, sometimes even less, but honestly, they do mess up the flow of the album for me just a little bit. And shifting isn't that good either. I feel like there's a lot of good ideas here, but I think it just should have been fleshed out so much more. There are decent ideas here, but not enough for 2 minutes. And the rest of the album is sort of a mixed bag. The Weather Channel is pretty decent. It's one of the most left field, experimental, and progressive tracks here, and a pretty long one at that. And I mean it too. This is OPN really branching out, which is even hard to fathom because he has branched out so much. And I'll be honest, I like this track a lot, but it took me a long time to really wrap my head around it. For me, it takes a couple minutes to really get going when a lot of the synths come in. I actually enjoyed a lot more. Hell, there's even some almost Tim Hecker vibes here, but the final 2 minutes here are pretty amazing. Tales from the Trash Stratum, on the other hand, grips me right off the bat, forces you to pay attention. Once again, it's super whimsical, sort of on the playful side. And by the end of this, it's absolutely gorgeous, even elegant. But I will say this, it is one of the safer moments here, not like that's a terrible thing. Imago, though, is my least favorite track here by far. And you know what? It's a shame because there was a time where a sample-heavy, intense track like this from Oneohtrix Point Never would probably excite the hell out of me. This is not it, though. Nothing ever really comes of this track. There's no progression here at all. It's just obnoxious. But he does, though, really end off the album with a couple of real knockouts. Wave Idea is a stroke of genius. It's spacious and quite beautiful at times, but it never really feels organic in a weird way. Like much of Age Of, this track sounds gorgeous from a distance. But something is a little off about it. It sounds kind of plastic. It makes you uneasy, but I love that about Daniel's music. It's also just so light on the ears and beautiful at times. It just reminds you of this world that he can put together. And Nothing Special as a finale is great. It is genuinely heart-wrenching. It is so emotional, especially compared to like other tracks like this that Daniel has tried to put across. Like if you weren't into some of the vocal work that he tried out on Age Of, I implore you, check this track out. It comes off a lot better. It just sounds so disheveled, so final. I love that. So yeah, you know, my thoughts on this album are, this is one of the safer albums that Daniel Lopatin has put out in quite some time, I think. However, even then, he is immersing himself in this whimsical, playful, magical, like the album states, world. It's pretty fantastic to hear what he could do, and he could put together this own little weird world. Yes, it's not as abrasive or as telling as some of his last couple of albums, but he's become an absolute modern master of electronics and experimental music. I'm feeling like a decent to strong 7 on this album. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. Until next time, have a great day, guys.